Welcome back to the Let's Go Win podcast, where we are here to help you be happy, healthy, wealthy, and get better every single day. This conversation is absolutely going to be amazing. I cannot wait to have this gentleman on. He delivers such value. He's brought it to the world for 14 plus years with his incredible company, and he is just a wealth of knowledge. Joel Brown is a pioneering figure in self-development, renowned for his website, Addicted to Success, which has impacted millions globally. With over 14 years of experience, he's directly influenced thousands through training and events. Joel is a seasoned coach in various areas, including problem solving and executive coaching. He's built 2 successful online businesses, featured in documentaries alongside top leaders, and is a dynamic speaker. His podcast and YouTube channel hosts renowned guests, reflecting his ability to inspire and empower others towards success. Joel is a persuasive leader, blending unique skills to make a significant mark in self-development and business. The episode with Joel Brown was absolutely dynamic. It went in a way that I didn't expect at all. I asked a question near the end, and it was related to really God and his faith. And the answers that you're going to hear in there are just, I mean, it was literally mind-blowing, you guys. I personally have had such an interesting roller coaster of a ride with my relationship with religion and God. What he said literally inspired me to buy a Bible immediately after hearing him talk about some of the stories and some of the things that he learned. And that's just a small snippet of the episode. That's at the last 15 minutes or so. And it's incredible. I mean, when I say hearing him speak was absolutely incredible. But we also got in early on how he built, Addicted to Success, and how he has really been able to forgive people in order to really grow as a human being, as a businessman. And the conversation throughout is so applicable to everyone. You're just absolutely going to love it. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. I personally took so much away, both from a business standpoint, from relationship standpoint, and to have him now in my circle of friends is just, I feel so blessed. And he gives an amazing offer to go take a quiz to figure out your procrastination method. And it's something that every single one of us will absolutely benefit from. So you enjoy it. At the end of the day, get ready to write some stuff down, enjoy the conversation. And I'm just, I'm so excited to bring this to you. Well, you have built some amazing things, brother. And I'm just so blessed and grateful to have you on the show, man. How you doing today?
Thanks for having me, brother. Yeah, it's been an interesting life so far. Very grateful. You and I also just did an episode on my podcast, so I'm excited for that to get out there. My audience will love it, I know. So thank you for having me on your platform and trusting me to bring the wisdom too.
Well, you definitely do that, man. And what I think is most attractive about what you bring to the table is you're just so genuine and humble. I want to know, brother, of all the things that you've built, what are you most proud of when you look back and you're like, this is something I didn't expect. I'm so damn proud of what we did. And it doesn't have to be business. I'm just curious, when you really think, man, I'm proud of this, what is that for you?
Honestly, it's not even business. It's humbling myself before God and healing myself through my commitment to facing off with my wounds and my trauma, taking ownership, which we talked about on my podcast. You were very big on accountability and ownership on that episode, which is great. And my relationship with my wife, she's amazing. We have such a powerful marriage. It's a blessing, and it's definitely a payoff. It's a result of working through the healing processes. I'm a coach, and I've impacted thousands of people's lives over the last 14 years coaching. And I see the effects that healing does when you attend to your childhood wounds. And when you forgive your mother, your father, your siblings, ex-partners, old friends, and it just lifts the veil in your life, and you see more clearly, and you start making powerful decisions. And so that has been the transformative experience for me over the last probably 5 years. Out of my 14 years of coaching, I've really leveled up, and I'm most proud of that, for sure, because it has a positive effect, as a ripple effect, to all the people around me too.
There's so many questions I want to ask from that answer, but I want to get into this forgiveness thing. I think this is one of the most powerful ideas for everyone out there. It's not forgiveness for, you mentioned, like I have business partners. I've had two that have stolen money from me in my time. But it's not forgiving for them. It's forgiving for you so you can show up. Has that been the place for you, is to really do that? And how did you go about forgiveness? Because I know it's something that I've talked to my brother specifically on this subject, and he's been very open to say, I don't know that I know how to, JM.
Yeah.
What did it look like for you, brother?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you had Thais Gibson on your podcast. I always heard that forgiveness was important. You even see Jesus as he's dragging his cross, beard ripped out, rib cage showing, spat on, scorned, as he's going to his crucifixion. And he looks to the heavens and says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know. And I feel like until I properly forgave and released it, I didn't fully understand that. And maybe someone's listening right now and they're like, I get it, but there's more to it than that, right? Jesus saw beyond the cross. He saw the mission that was before him, and he could see beyond it, past the pain, past the rejection, past the ridicule. And when I made a decision after sitting with Thais about 5 years ago, she highlighted the importance of forgiveness, because I kept hitting a block within my own self-betrayal, because I was just always giving over to others and in relationships that were unhealthy. And I realized that in order for me to achieve my mission of more potential and growth, it required for me to face off with the part of myself that was most fearful, and that was a fear of being rejected by my mother and my father. It's like if some random walked up to you in the middle of the road and said something to you, it's like water off a duck's back. You're like, oh, whatever, loser. If you criticize you, you're like, I don't even know who this person is, right? But when it's somebody that you want validations from and approval and confirmation from, and you're sitting with them sharing, I forgive you for the time where you said this or did this, and I made it mean that I'm not good enough or I'm not loved. And what I needed at that time was I just needed a hug from you, or what I needed from that time was to know that I'm safe in this household, that you do actually care about me, that I am your child, and that you want the best for me. When I can attend to my wounds in that way, it's very healing. And that was the process. Thais asked me 5 years ago, how is my relationship with my mother? And I'm very close with my mom. We're great. I'm like, yeah, she's great. She taught me about personal development and she's always been supportive. She's like, cool. What about your dad? I'm like, yeah, he's great. Every time I go back to Australia, he's fine and great person to connect with. She looked at me and she asked me this question. So simple, yet so profound. She asked, if your father was to die today, would you feel complete in your relationship with him? And I tell you what, JM, I felt tension all in my jaw and straining in my head, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek. And she said, there's something there. And there was. It was all this pressure and this tension. And it was because I genuinely did not feel that my relationship would be complete with my father. So I reached out to him. He's a very stoic Aussie man. And I told him, and he just had silence on the other end of the line. I was living in Bali at the time, Indonesia. And he says, oh, Joel, I think you're just psychoanalyzing everything. And I just said, okay. I said, Dad, this is really important to me. I really genuinely feel like that. And he opened up and he said, I'm sorry. He said, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were younger. I do regret it. I wish I was around more. And then he shared what it was like from birth, how my mom had postnatal depression and she hugged on to me and had this transference of energy that anxiousness equals love. So whenever I was in a toxic relationship and I felt anxious, I thought that was love when it wasn't. And I always wanted to be able to reach out to my father, and he was dismissive. And so I constantly would attract dismissive, avoidant women. And it was this way of my subconscious programs trying to, what we call, close a loop. I was constantly trying to get needs met from women that represented, even though I'm heterosexual, I'm not homosexual, but like needs met from women that were representing my father. When I healed that wound with my father and we talked about forgiveness, my whole attraction to women absolutely shifted. Like it was like a seismic shift over to a different type of woman after that. And that was the healing that took place. But it did something deep at the core, JM. I realized I didn't need validation from people around me anymore, right? I was able to actually stand up for myself for the first time, and actually confront the scariest parts of myself. And then when I walked away from that, went, you know what? I just did the hardest thing to stand before in the conversation with my father, but also to have that conversation with my mother. Now nothing else can beat that, right? And it's like, when you've had a huge loss in your life, it's like, well, it can't get any worse than that, and I'm still here. So it's sort of that process. It can be very confronting, obviously, and some people might not be able to have the actual conversation with their mother or father in person, and so you go through a process where you write a forgiveness letter yourself. And it allows you to be able to recognize where you didn't get your needs met when you were younger. Because as a kid, you don't know how to meet your needs. You don't have the personal development tools or the frameworks or the exercises. So when you can address it now, you're reconciling with the subconscious, showing the unconscious that, hey, I'm here to stand up for myself now. You no longer have to run the show. I'm no longer a slave to my mind. I'm the master of it. It's you getting back on the horse and taking the reins instead of that wild horse, that Brumby running around on the loose, dangerous. And so that has been the healing process for me, man.
Wow.
With forgiveness.
What an amazing question she asked. But what's really interesting to me is you didn't necessarily know, right? Like you said, it was in the
Yeah.
subconscious that I had something that I needed to process or work through with my dad. When you did it with your dad, how did that relationship change, evolve? Is it that much more fulfilling and rewarding? And here's why. You and I talked about taking action on your podcast. This is one of those things where if you are aware of this conversation you need to have, I say it all the time, courage is like a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. I imagine having that to a stoic Aussie man. I have a picture of him in my mind. I've never seen him, but I have a picture of him in my mind. That's not necessarily an easy conversation to have because I imagine, kind of old school like my dad, like sharing feelings wasn't exactly something that we did. So I guess a couple of questions is, how did that relationship change? And, how has it evolved, brother? Are you so glad that you took this leap, this faith, this thing that Thais said, hey, Joel, you have
Absolutely.
something there? Yeah. What does that look
Yeah,
like?
absolutely. So a couple of things, and thanks for asking. A couple of things. My father shared what his upbringing was like, which helped me to understand how he was. And I can say, hand on heart, he has done so well based off what I know he came from, right? So my respect for him shifted. It wasn't just like, oh, my father's, yeah, he's fine, but like, here's all the things that I wish I had from him. Now it's like, oh my God, I can understand him. I started looking at him in a different way. I also realized that I didn't need him in the way that I thought I needed him, that he also is a human just like me. I didn't pedestal him as somebody that I needed validation from anymore. I was like, damn, he's actually done quite well. And he's fallible, just like I am. Everyone's imperfect, right, in this world. So he told me that his father one time threw a hammer across a room and he turned and it hit him in the shoulder. His father never apologized to him. He told me that he had never heard his father say to him to his face, I love you, and give him a hug. It wasn't until he was on his deathbed dying of cancer that when he told my father he had cancer, he had hugged for the first time, and tears ran down his face when his father was like late 70s. So I could understand my father more. And I said, I don't want that type of relationship with you. I want a better relationship now. And my dad was always being this stick in the mud. He's the type of guy where I remember he'd say, Dad, why don't you leave Australia and go travel? He's like, why do I need to leave Australia? I can see the whole world on the TV here at home, like the sort of staying in the safety bubble. And so I always just thought, like, there's no changing. But he used to make comments too when I talk about personal development, and he'd say, oh, that's not what I do. That's like your mum's thing. And it sort of felt like I couldn't go there with him. But after that, he reached out to my mom. They're together, but like he said to my mom, I've booked flights and we're flying to Bali. We're going to go to one of Joel's personal development events. And he had a different conversation with my brother, and that healed the relationship with my brother. He started approaching his marriage with my mom differently as well. I never expected this. This is all a bonus. You can't expect it. You can't have those expectations because everyone's going to respond differently. But what I know is it created a shift in the dynamics in a positive way. My father came to our Bali event that my friend and I held with 60 people in the room. He was on stage and he teared up, and he was doing breakthroughs and having transformations on stage. He was like the father for the people at the event that had father wounds, and he was there to be a representation of what's possible. It was so healing. And none of that would have happened if the forgiveness didn't take place.
What a gift, man. I mean, again, we talked about my dad. I can only imagine the feeling you had watching this take place. How incredible that is. The other thing that, as you're talking, we don't know what people's lens is because we don't know what they've gone through. This is probably the biggest empathy lesson that I've received, is to give empathy, because I don't know. You may be acting like a complete asshole, but you know what? I don't know what you've gone through. I don't know your background. And by the way, I never can. I can't go back and relive, but it's made me, and my wife and I talk about this often, it's given me so much more empathy and grace towards people that when they act out, to say, do you know what they've gone through? Do you have any freaking clue what their history is? And the answer is always going to be no. Not really a question there. I'm just curious your thoughts on it, just because it's a subject that we riff on often.
Yeah, look, it's tough enough to even know ourselves at times, right? Most people don't really know who they are. So we'd be foolish to think that we can put everyone around us in a box and know exactly who they are. I think that's why we like labels, right? We like to categorize people and say we know who they are. Personalities are very dynamic. I think that understanding the core subconscious patterns are very powerful. I don't like playing the surface too much. I'm very big on understanding more about the unconscious, because that's where most of our actions are coming from, right? You said on my podcast, on my podcast, you said that it's about action over words, right? And the actions are very telling as to where we are in our programs in the subconscious. Bruce Lipton, who I had on my podcast, said that your reality is a direct printout of your subconscious programs. So everything that you have in your life, the house you live in, the amount of money you get paid per hour, what you put in your body and all that, is all based off what you believe in your subconscious. And that requires a good look at yourself, doesn't it? Because it's like, well, if there's something I don't like in my life, it's something I get to reprogram because it's not working for me. Or it is working for you, keep doing it. Great. And that's why I like your book, Upgrade, too. I just love that idea of like upgrading from where you are, right? And so the forgiveness is really about letting go of the boulder that's holding you back so you can move forward. The process of that is identify, accept, and let go. You can't skip any of those steps. It has to be you identify that there's a wound there that took place. There's an event where you didn't have your needs met. The acceptance is facing off with it and saying, it did happen. I'm not going to run from it anymore. I'm not going to hide, avoid, and pretend not to know. I'm actually going to confront this now. And then the letting go process is actually having the conversation or writing the letter, or writing it, then burning the letter, and then releasing it and making a decision that I'm no longer going to allow for this to have rule over me, that I now am getting back on the horse and taking the reins, right? So for me in my life, what I do is I really reflect on the journey that it's taken me to get to where I am. And I'm still learning, brother. I'm still on the horse going on a big, long journey, just like you, right? But I can also notice more and more people that aren't on the horse, where their horse is running wild in the paddock. And so, yeah, we get to have grace for people like that. I've coached over 12,000 people through different formats, summits, conference events, retreats, one-on-ones, group coaching, and so on over 14 years. And after a while, you start to notice similar patterns. You can tell when people are unhealed. You can tell when something's coming from insecurity. You can tell when someone isn't meeting their needs and they're burning themselves out because they're betraying themselves and they're a people pleaser. You can tell when somebody is an obsessive idealist, they're a high achiever, but they're doing it because they feel lack and not good enough, right? And the more that I know that, the more grace I have for people, man, because I've seen people come from that pattern or those patterns and go into more healed, and I can see the difference. People show up a lot more fulfilled and happy and more clear-minded, and they articulate themselves well when they are more healed. So the truth is we live in a very unhealed world. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so driven to coach more people and to support people. One of the things that we talked about just before this podcast, before we hit record, is procrastination. And this is my specialty. I am an expert in the field of supporting people to be able to break their procrastination patterns. I've done that for the last 9 years now. I've created a whole system around it. And the reason why we procrastinate has very little to do with time management. It has to do with emotional management. And the sooner we can find out why certain emotions are getting triggered and where we're coming from, whether it's like not feeling good enough or fear of not being loved or fear of failure and mistakes, the sooner we can heal the core so that the effects and the habits and the routines and the decisions start to change and we have a better quality of life. That's how we start to win more. That's how we upgrade our life.
I love that. How did you discover the procrastination? Because Addicted to Success is freaking phenomenal. And I'm curious if you're like, yeah, man, I knew it 5 years old. This is my purpose. This is my dream. Or what did that look like for you? Did you start something cool and then you realize, holy shit, man, like I have discovered my purpose. I am the one really blessed person on this earth that I know exactly what I want to do. And then I guess I wrapped up two questions with that because the discovering this procrastination thing is fascinating to me. I'm curious how that came about. So maybe you can address both of those. And if not, I'll make sure to come around to it again.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. I'll do my best to tie this together. When I was 7 years old, I remember watching the classic hit movie where Bugs Bunny teams up with Michael Jordan to kick the Monstars' ass in the classic movie Space Jam, right? You remember that one? Space Jam?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember feeling so inspired to follow my dreams. I wanted to be like Mike. As you can see, even behind me, I've got the Michael Jordan poster of this classic dunk that he does, right? And everyone's in awe. But I remember my mom gave me this book called Rare Air, and it's Michael Jordan's biography book. And there's a lot of really awesome photography, like the picture behind me of him dunking, but also his life. And I got very curious and interested at 7 years old of what makes Michael Jordan the best. There was just something about how is he different from everybody else? And my friend actually sent me a compilation of Michael Jordan's earlier days in the first 5 years of his career, and he absolutely dominated. Like, I know he played for the Bulls. The way he charged through the court and to the ring was like a bull. It was insane. And I just watched him like, wow, this guy's so athletic. But it wasn't just like his speed and his precision. It was his mindset that I was so interested by. I was fascinated by it. I remember saying to my mom, you know, as a little kid, we have this fascination with like superheroes, right? We're like, what if that is possible? What if you could fly? What if you could have X-ray vision? And when I was a kid, I remember watching the NBA games on the TV, and I would do this little thing where I would like put my finger to the side of my head and I go, and I'd imagine I could see X-ray vision of all the players. And it sounds so weird saying it right now, but it's like just how a kid thinks, right? With imagination. And I remember saying to my Mom, what makes Michael Jordan the best? Because if I was to use X-ray vision, he has a heart that pumps like all the other players. He has a skeleton like all the other players. He's actually not that big and muscly like some of them. He's not the tallest player. But what makes him the best? And my mum said it's his mindset. So I remember when I got the Rare Air book for my birthday, I would read through it religiously. I even took it to school and got it taken off me once because I was reading it in class. But I just remember seeing that he would do rituals and habits and he would practice. And I remember getting into my mind at 7 years old that if you apply yourself and keep showing up, you will succeed. Now, I went through high school. I was severely bullied in high school. It was pretty much bullying every single day I was in school. I used to do capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial arts, taekwondo and kickboxing. And so I was pretty well versed in fighting, right? But if you've ever done martial arts, you realize the more you learn to fight, the less you actually want to do it. You just have it more as a defense than an offense. And I used to see the group of guys in my school go around picking on all the other kids. And I hated that. I hated injustice. So I stood up to them. And after a while, they saw me as a target and started turning on me. And one day, a huge fight broke out. I got tapped on the shoulder. I got king hit, jumped by 10 guys. I started beating a few of them up. But then it just turned into this bloody fight. And I was there for like literally 10 minutes. Teachers couldn't get them off me. It was like a big fight that went on for a long time. Police got involved, went to court. I ended up going back to school, but then I dropped out because I just couldn't focus. So I was a high school dropout. I remember hitting this fork in the road where I was either going to be the victim or the victor. And that's where I started to develop this pattern of what we call the Superman complex. And this is called overcompensationary success, where you're trying to achieve the highest level to prove to other people that you cannot be beaten. And this is where even the name Addicted to Success stemmed from. Looking back on it in more of my healed self now, going, I can kind of see what I did there. I was like obsessed. And it's not bad to be driven. It's not bad to be focused. It's just that when you think that that's going to be the answer to all your life's problems and it's going to bring you fulfillment, you're going to be rudely awakened to the fact that it's not the whole kit and caboodle, right? So I walked through life with a very strong ambition. I succeeded a lot. I did really well in the music industry, managing songwriters, producers. We signed under a subsidiary of Atlantic Records, had a big record deal, worked with some huge artists that are even around today, like big hip hop stars and artists. I dropped out because I felt like it wasn't my thing. I was playing in the background a lot as a manager and I wanted to be more in the spotlight. I built Addicted to Success. We absolutely crushed it. As you mentioned, 372 million views worldwide. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson shared some articles from it. We crashed out our servers because it reached millions of views in one day. We had to like upgrade all our servers. I started getting asked to speak at events to teach people how to be able to build successful online businesses. And so my rise to the top was just constant accolades, pats on the back, featured in documentary films like Think and Grow Rich, We Rise Up with Tony Robbins, the Dalai Lama, Richard Branson, all these like things, right? And so it kept fueling me. And I realized I got to a point where I started to become fearful of making mistakes because I didn't want to screw it up. It's like when you said like you made that money, like 7 figures, and it's like, whoa, man, how come I don't feel amazing, right? Like, can I hold this? It was like an identity mismatch with the amount that I started to make and the I guess the significance that was coming in. And I was hitting my upper limits. And I realized that I was so driven from lack and scarcity of having to prove myself with this Superman complex or Michael Jordan complex of not feeling good enough. And I wanted to overcome that pattern. I was like, hey, I still want to crush it and do really well, but I don't want to have this constant fear and stress in my life and adrenal fatigue and burnout trying to get to the top and maintaining the top. So I started studying my patterns, and every time I'd come across a pattern that wasn't me, I'd just put it to the side. Like, okay, that pattern keeps showing up in human behavior. Let's put it over here. And I studied a lot of human behavior, psychotherapy, psychology, and so on. I started really geeking out over it. And I started finding these patterns. I realized my particular procrastination type was called the obsessive idealist, right? Very high expectations of myself and others, can be quite judgmental of myself, all or nothing type of personality, 0 to 100 real quick, can be very black and white thinking about things. But the back end of that, as much as you can achieve a lot of success, there's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of not feeling good enough. No matter how much you achieve, it's not enough. And you can be very sacrificing of other dimensions of your life and categories of your life just to achieve success, money success and material success. So yeah, I learned how to manage those patterns. I learned how to heal those patterns. I learned how to notice when those emotions are showing up and how to essentially get back on the horse and take the reins again. And again, it's management. It can sneak up a little bit from time to time, but it starts to lose its charge as you work through the acceptance tools, frameworks, and exercises that I've created. And so what I did, JM, was I realized there were 5 other types. So that's one type, the obsessive idealist. But the 5 other types, and you guys can take the quiz. If you're listening right now, watching this, go to doquiz.com. Okay, DOQUIZ.com. It takes like 3 minutes to take the quiz. Don't procrastinate. Take the quiz, and we'll send you a free report. You can see a whole analysis breakdown of your patterns, why you do it, how to be able to overcome it and start repatterning it. It's about counteracting those patterns that have been in play for so long. So it weakens it and does pruning of the synapses so that your new neural pathways start to get stronger so that you can manage it better and start showing up more powerfully. And this really, truly does upgrade your mind. It upgrades your subconscious programs and your way of thinking, which results in better decisions and better outcomes in your life. But the 5 other types of these, you have the obsessive idealist, which I just mentioned. You have the dreadhead, which tends to have this fear of getting out of the comfort zone. They have great big dreams and they want to achieve things. And I genuinely believe they want to when they tell me. Consciously, they want their dreams. But the fear of not being able to achieve it overwhelms them. They have a fear of failure that comes into play. They play small and turtle back in when things start to stretch and the growth takes place. So it's very unfortunate because they're playing small in life. The third type is the stargazer. The stargazer hops around from idea to idea. They have very good with their visions and their goals. They can actually paint very vivid, great imagination-based images of their goals, but they find it very hard to complete any of them. They don't finish things often. Then you have the diversion junkie, which chases entertaining distractions in times where responsibilities are required. Then you have the angry altruist, which is the people pleaser. They're always feeling resentment towards others and themselves because they're giving away so much of themselves. Very transactional, and they tend to put themselves on the back burner all the time. And then we have the radical defiant, which tends to struggle with teamwork, struggle with being vulnerable. They tend to have this sort of dog eat dog world mentality, and it's very detrimental to their growth. Very lonely, very sad at the core. So, these types, everyone can have elements of them in their life, but we tend to have a dominant leaning towards one of those procrastination types. So, yeah, I teach people how to heal them, work through them. I identified my own first, worked through that almost 9 years ago now. Then I started to develop a system to support others. And I've ran over 7,000 people through the trainings of the procrastination types. And we have just testimonial after testimonial of people that have worked through that. So it's pretty cool stuff. So doquiz.com is where you can take the quiz.
Yeah, go check it out, you guys. 100%. I have not taken it yet. I was looking at it over the weekend, and then I got pulled away to something. So I'm going to go do it. You mentioned, so you recognize it. You have this procrastinator, whatever one we fall into.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things that I've learned most about myself, I value freedom above anything else in this world. It's my favorite thing is freedom. When you were talking, several people came to mind where I'm like, they have created these amazing businesses. They've become literally celebrities and superstars, but they've almost lost what they valued along the way. And I can speak to it because I've done the same thing. I value freedom more than anything, but I'm chasing success or I'm chasing the dollar or whatever it is. And I forget, wait a minute, I'm doing it so I can have freedom with my family to do these things. How do you check in on yours, brother, to make sure that you're not going back into that pattern? Do you have a system set up to be like,
Yeah.
Joel, dude, stop? Or, what does that look like for you? Because I believe in work-life harmony, work-life balance. I do believe in it, but I know people struggle with that. And some people have even said, that's bullshit, James. It doesn't exist. What are your thoughts on it, man?
Yeah, I'm not big on balance because I think balance is running around spinning plates. I'm big on harmony too, like you said. I think as the tide rises, so do the boats. And so we have 10 categories of life. You have business and career, finances, health, romance, fun and adventure, physical environment, spiritual development, personal development. You have family and friends and contribution, right? So they're the 10 areas. And so I consider this when I map out my vision for the future. You talk a lot about the vision for the future, and I do a 10-year vision, but I pay attention to the 1 and 2 year vision the most because things can change. As you mentioned on my podcast, you evolve, you grow faster than you think when you start getting intentional. And also you might tweak it along the way. Like no vision is set in stone, it's written in the sand, and we can tweak it as we go. So for me, it's really coming back to the vision. Like, where are we going with this? If we had a map for where we desire to head to, what does it look like? Because if the decisions that I make today determines where I will be tomorrow and next week, or in a month from now, then it's probably going to be pretty important for me to start making decisions that are in alignment with where I desire to head, rather than just letting life push me around. So I get intentional. I'm not very big on law of attraction. I understand the aspects of, you want to match a frequency of what it is that you desire. I understand that. But I'm very big on law of intention, which is set it and get it, right? Like get into action, build structure, aim for it. Because we can quite easily fall into wishful thinking if we're waiting for it to come to us, right? So I connect with my why. It sounds very simple, but it's so true. I go back to my why whenever I start to feel like I'm coming off track. It's like, hey, why do I make money? Why is building this business and scaling it important? Why do I want to only be spending this many hours a day working? Why am I a husband? Why am I focused on being the breadwinner and this is my family? Like, why are these things important to me? And maintaining a strong connection to the priorities that I must have in my life. And I say the word must because, a lot of people talk about strategy. Oh, if I just had a strategy. Strategy is just another word for priorities. It's working out the sequence of what's most important and sticking to it, right? And I think a lot of people just have poor priority management in their life. They just don't know really. They haven't got clear, but they're running without a plan. And so I come back to the plan and it keeps me on track. And then the subconscious aspects of what's happening when it comes to the emotional management, I'm making sure that I'm remembering what I'm grateful for. That helps me to bring the charge down on the feeling of not good enough, because that was a big scarcity driver to push me to success. And it's exhausting. I'd rather achieve success based off inspiration, not relying on trying to be motivated from scarcity or lack. And I also celebrate my wins, man. I never used to do that. I used to just like constantly run forward and think it whatever I have wasn't enough. So I celebrate my wins. I take my Saturday off. That's my Sabbath. It's my day of rest. I just chill and spend that time with God, man. Plug in, have that synchronicity with heaven, connect with something greater than myself. And that just gets me into more of a 360 view of where I'm going for the week ahead.
That's amazing. You know, you've mentioned God and Jesus a few times. So faith is clearly, I think, something that is important in your life. My thoughts or my question is, for me, I was raised Catholic, didn't jive with it, man. It just wasn't my thing, right?
Yeah.
I would consider myself more of a Buddhist or Taoist if I would have put a label on it, and I really don't anymore. But those would be more the world I play in. However, recently, God and the idea, I used to not even like saying the word, honestly. That's how much
Yeah.
I got disconnected from it. It's really
Yeah.
interesting saying it aloud. I don't think I've ever talked about this on the show. But more recently, I talk to God, I talk to universe, I talk to spirit guides. Those are the three that I really go to. How has that been for you, man? Because you've mentioned this, you mentioned Jesus, you mentioned God. What does that look like for you? Because it seems like faith is obviously a big part of you. Has it always been that way, brother? Has it always been a relationship that you've been strong with? Or have you fallen in and out like I did along the way?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I'm really happy that you brought it up. So, and I'm just thinking of the best way to unpack this for the sake of time. I was brought up in a Christian home. I never had church hurt, right? I never felt like, oh, I can't stand this. I want to wait. I thought Christians were kind of dorky a bit. I thought they played small and they had a limited mindset. And to some degree, some can, but so can other people outside of it as well. And I just went out in the world and did my own thing. You know, I went and learned a lot about the metaphysical stuff. I looked into the Akashic records and mysticism and all the Egyptian teachings and the Kabbalah and all those things. And I got into all of it, Buddhism, Taoism. And I really wanted to just find what are the best methods for coaching and how can I find the most fascinating things and bring it to the world. That's what was driving me to try a lot of different things. But I had an experience 8 years ago with a woman who prayed over me. I felt very empty. I was speaking on stages around the world. I was featuring documentary films. I felt like I just hit the top of the summit and I was like, is this it? And I told her that. And she said, hey, let me pray for you. So she did. She asked me, do I know Jesus? And I said, well, I go, yeah, I grew up, you know, hearing about it in a Christian home, da, da, da. And she's like, yeah, but do you know him, like a relationship with him? Do you understand like why he did what he did? And I was like, well, yeah, but I just don't like religion. She's like, well, no, he didn't even teach religion. As a matter of fact, he stood in the face of the religious and confronted them and they crucified him. And, you know, I felt within myself like, wow, maybe I'm missing something. Because when I was younger, it was just this young mind. I wasn't absorbing it because it's sort of like just doing what I was told to do. And in the scriptures, it doesn't say grandchildren of God. It says children of God, which means that you've got to accept God for yourself, not because your parents accepted it. And so I started to learn about the difference between religion and relationship. And it's a huge difference. Jesus taught relationship with God. The things that you mentioned to me, like praying directly to God and having your experience, Jesus is, in my understanding, God came down the mountain to meet with us. He broke bread with us. He wanted to show his character to us because we had strayed so far away from God's teachings, because that's just in our heart, is to try and do our own thing, right? And he came with grace and came with mercy. And when he said that he would die on the cross and resurrect, how could we trust that somebody loved us that much unless they would have sacrificed themselves in the physical and do what they said that they would do? I know that you said to me that one of the greatest lessons you could leave with your kids is for your kids to one day say, my dad really did what he said he was going to do. And so that's what Christ did, is he did what he said he was going to do. And there's no other prophet, no other leader, nobody on this earth in any of the other texts or scriptures that ever did and followed through with what they said they were going to do. He's the only one that was perfect, that walked sinless on earth and rose himself from the dead and offers our salvation. That can only come from God. Like, try for even a week, man, to not slip out of your original design. All of us are fallible. All of us are imperfect. So the more that I realize that, I'm like, man, why do we glorify Tony Robbins and glorify, you know, Deepak Chopra and all these people? They're all fallible like us, right? Why not go to the one that actually walked this earth in perfection, that was pure love, that healed, that brought good news to the people and was willing to die for his beliefs and rose again in his mission and fulfilled his whole vision and created a proxy out of this dark fallen kingdom on earth and gave us answers to some of the biggest questions in life that nobody else could even answer. So to me, it was very powerful. And even if you were to read the scriptures without even looking at it from a religious perspective, so many of the personal development books out there are built off the backbone of the scriptures. Like the more that I read the scriptures, I'm like, wait a minute, like personal development did a watered down version of something that Jesus said ages ago, right? And like there's so many other things too, brother. There's like over 4,000 prophecies that have been fulfilled already, and there's like 14% left before the end of times. And so to like read that and consistently see over and over again the logical consistency, the empirical evidence in history, and the experiential relevance that I've had in my experience of God and relationship too, which can be anecdotal. That's why you need logical consistency and you must test the word to see if it's legitimate too. The more that I did that, the more my faith just continued to increase more and more and more over time, you know? So yeah, it's honestly one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever experienced in my life, more than speaking on stages in front of tens of thousands of people, more than being in documentary films, more than the 372 million views and staying in penthouse hotels and driving fancy sports cars and all those things, man. This is the promise that God gives to us that nothing else can fulfill on this earth. It's like, what's your other option? Where do we go with this?
Brother, you and I are going to continue this conversation with one another. I could talk to you about this for, I don't know, days.
Yeah.
It's funny because you even mentioned, as you were talking about Michael Jordan, two things came to mind. I was like, well, A, he had a 44-inch vertical, and B, he did have mistakes. And that's what I love what you said. It's like everyone is, we're human. We make mistakes. And it is fascinating, brother, because I say every day, one of my things that I'm grateful for is my relationship with God. And now I actually do believe I am a part of God, as are you, as is everyone. That is such a leap from where I was even a couple of years ago. God, I'm looking at time. I cannot believe how fast this has gone. What haven't I asked you, brother, that you're like, I have to get this off my chest to your audience before we wrap up? Because that was heavy. That was amazing. I can't wait to discuss further with you. But last open forum, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll expand just a little bit more on the God conversation before we leave, because we can talk personal development all day, and that's great, and it's awesome stuff. But I would say that ultimately, we can't pull our own soul up by our own shoestrings. We can't do that, right? Now, we live in a world, no doubt, where there's good and evil. If anyone thinks that it's all just good, you're living under a rock, right? We have very interesting things happening in the world, and it's not to come from fear at all. It's just to wake ourselves up and open our eyes and see, how is this thing playing out? At the end of the day, to know the narrative of the story that's unfolding, the word his story is his story. It's God's story. It's unfolding, and we're a part of it, whether you like it or not. Why not tap in to upgrade and find out, man, if this here, and I've got it right in front of me, this is a Bible, right? This book is a book of gold. I've read hundreds of personal development books, and many of them are so good. They break down complex things. And get your hands on JM's book as well, all three of them. And, you know, they're great. But ultimately, this book here, if you were to look at the acronym of what the word Bible means, is basic instructions before leaving Earth, right? Why would I not want the manual from the creator to find out how I can best use this product, this creation, this incredible design and machine of who I am, so I can live out the fullness of my life and create the biggest impact possible? And, you know, as I started to surround myself with billionaires, multimillionaires, thought leaders, like best-selling authors, all that, like rubbing shoulders with people who I used to read their books, and next thing I'm having coffee with them and we're hanging out like friends. I'm like finding that the people that got it the most weren't religious people. They weren't the people that were atheists. They weren't the people that were generally just secular and sort of like didn't quite know or were left. It was the people that grounded themselves in the principles of what the Word of God says, lived it out, and held themselves to the standard of what God called them to, not because of religious rules, but because they genuinely felt the transformation from within, because they now finally have a relationship with their Creator, and they are getting the information to how best to do life. And I noticed a difference in character. Okay. Everyone, again, fallible, they can make their mistakes and so on. But when I looked to those that lived by this, I saw the depth in the relationships they had cultivated. I saw the way that they showed up as husbands or wives or fathers or mothers in their family. I saw the way that they approached business. I saw the way that they didn't sell themselves out because they held themselves to their relationship with God, and they could see beyond. They play the infinite game, not the finite game that's here on earth. They play the infinite, eternal game, and they're not conforming to the patterns of the world. I'm like, how are they doing it? It can only come from a relationship with God, because God is teaching them through his word, and his spirit is entering into them. They are no longer conforming to the patterns of the world, but being transformed by the renewing of their mind. And when I saw that and felt it in my spirit, I'm like, I want that. And that is more valuable than anything in this world and anything that any other book could teach you. So yeah, man, it's not just reading the book, it's living it. I think that I saw a quote the other day. It was so good. It says, the only Bible that a non-believer at times may ever read is you, their experience with you. So you've got to be so careful with that. It's like being the representation, but not bashing people over the head with it because you want them to agree with you, so that makes you feel confident in your beliefs. That's religion. I can't stand religion. I'm about relationship. Yes, I have like the practices and the rituals of like prayer time and saying grace and like reading the word from time to time. That is a religious practice, but I'm not doing it because I'm trying to stick to rules. I'm doing it because I love the fullness of the experience, and I can just see the fruits in my life expand more. So maybe you have an adversity to religion, and I fully understand that. And I think some people can really abuse it, but I would say give Christ a chance, like go to the New Testament and just start reading it and pray to God. Hey, you got nothing to lose. Just say, God, send your spirit to me, reveal to me the chapters, the verses that I get to apply to my life, and watch the fruits come into your life because of it. And it's something that's immeasurable within your own heart as well. You start actually finding peace in it. Jesus says, I am the peace that surpasses all understanding, which means you don't have to constantly be getting all this new knowledge all the time. You get to rest in him and grow upwards. And yeah, brother, it's been the most transformational thing in my life.
I have chills. I mean, look, I don't read the Bible, and it's 100% been because of my relationship with religion. Yep. I'm inspired to do it. I'm taking action. I'm literally going to go buy one immediately. Brother, I can't tell you, we've not covered that subject. We might have to do a follow-up on this, because I am so intrigued by the way your brain works, by your experiences, and how open you are, and how much you're inspiring people. That's what I think is absolutely incredible. So thank you for being here, man, inspiring my audience, and just keep doing it, man. It's just incredible. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for trusting me enough to share all this on your platform. I'm happy we went there. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Guys, I mean, there's not a lot much more I can say. Honestly, this was a powerful, powerful episode. Please go take the quiz, figure out your procrastinator, and also check in on your relationship with God. Honestly, you guys know I don't do this. This is not something that I've ever really advocated for. I'm telling you what he said about Bible. I'm going to go re-listen to that again. That was so powerful. Until next time, remember, your mindset matters. I appreciate all of you so much. We'll talk soon.